Broadcasting from the commodity capital of the world, Zurich, Switzerland, this is Insider's Guide to Energy.
This edition to Insider's Guide to Energy is brought to you by Fidectis. Go to www.fidectis.com for more information.
Welcome to the Insider's Guide to Energy podcast. My name is Johan Oberg and I'll be co-hosting today. Unfortunately, my dear friend Chris Ass is home recovering from a planned leg surgery, so we wish him all the best. One of the things that was quite interesting this morning, I have to tell you guys, is that I was out walking on my regular lunch walk and I almost blew off into the sea because of the wind. And I thought this would be a perfect introduction to today's topics. What we're going to talk about today is, among a lot of things, but it is about wind and energy trading around renewables. With me, I have a guest that I have the pleasure to work with many years ago. He went off to do new things, so did I, and ended up being at a new company based out of Switzerland. But before I do any more of this, I would like to introduce our guest of today, which is Dominik McInnis. Welcome to Insider's Guide to Energy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Excellent. We always say on the show that we know who our guests are because we had the opportunity to invite them. We had the opportunity to do a little bit of desktop research on the people, but some of our guests might not know who you are. So maybe you would be able to give them a little bit of background. Who is Dominik and what company are you working for?
Yeah, thank you. I will start maybe with, I was always passionate from studying about electricity and electricity markets. So started already during studies with first internship and specialization from engineering side on this. And then from there, I had the opportunity to combine private pleasure, that is skiing, with work. So I went from Germany to Lausanne, where the best ski resorts of the Alps are very close. And learned there really the business from, let's say, the very operational point of view, and then going basically from a very short-term approach and operational approach to more the long-term trading, and from there into more a sales role called origination in the electricity world, and then I ended up at my current job at Wind Energy Trading. So I'm the managing director of this company. We're a small company, 13 FTEs in total, and specialized on the balancing risk of renewables. So what does it mean? Balancing risk of renewables is really about making a day ahead forecast for wind and solar, and then trying to produce as little cost as possible between this forecast day ahead and the invoice for potential forecasting errors. So we're going through basically trading on the intraday market and basically selling and buying all open position that are generated by forecast changes or by availabilities of a solar or a wind farm. And this is now the very simplified version. In reality, we're talking about tons of data. We're talking about the tons of forecasts, different kind of forecasts. So not only the day ahead forecast, but as well intraday forecast, as well a forecast about the grid situation that you have to take into account. And for sure, there is well a lot of, you can automatize a lot of things in this market, and you have to, because otherwise you're not fast enough in this market, because it's a market that is already very automatized for a lot of good reasons. but then you still need to do to be there, support your automatized trading functionalities, and trade by hand if something goes wrong, or if you decide it's just more efficient to do it by hand because machines are, the brain is still stronger than the machines at the end. So you have to basically, sometimes it's in the interest of a good performance to do it rather by hand. So this is basically, we are running a shift team 24/7. And then on the side, we have a small, let's say, data IT team who is then supporting this activity. And this is basically the setup. And when you talk about renewables trading, it's like a kind of, everyone would like to do it and would be part of it. And there, let's say, every utility invests a lot of money to be up and running this. So wind energy trading really started as the founders that left last year when I took over were really doing this themselves, and this is basically what makes a difference as well in this company. So even though the company is 10 years now, it's still a very you work like in a startup environment. So we're very flexible, we're very fast, we program everything based on a database, so we have no costly, let's say, software that is driving let's say, our costs up to amounts that is making it impossible to make money. So we really have the goal to make money, and one side is the trading, but the other side is the cost to that. And this is basically the environment we're in, and what we try to do, make better every day.
That's an interesting one. We have had a few guests on, obviously from a trading point of view. We discussed on generation, on wind and solar, and on renewable energy. The majority of times, especially when we come into the trading parts, it's been associated to some of the larger utilities or companies with resources. Before we go in, and I have quite a few questions around the actual trading around the wind and the challenges and how you see the forecast of this, and especially on renewables. But maybe to start off a little bit around the company itself. You mentioned you're a 10-year-old company, but you are acting like a startup company, which I think is fascinating, because I think that's part of the whole energy transition. But how does this work in a risk industry, and also, never mind the last couple of months in terms of energy and the capital that is required in many ways? Give me a little bit of background on Vit, and also how this is managed.
Yeah, you're touching on a very important point. I mean, for sure, we're talking about like, we are in terms of size compared to the heads in the company. We're talking about revenues of 300 millions that we have to turn every month. So basically, you need a partner, and therefore the owner of wind energy trading is BKW. So therefore, it's 100% daughter, but they are well aware of the advantages that we have in this market compared to integrating this function completely into their utility-based and very, let's say, well organized, but very, let's say, slower and heavier organization. So the idea is really here to give the renewables what they need in terms of setup, and in terms of flexibility and speed, and I mean, this market is facing quite some challenges at the moment. So just to mention one is redispatch. So basically, the renewable, or every renewable asset is now integrated into the redispatch system. So it's kind of like, you have to it's like creating a new market from the scratch with all, let's say, problems, and you're doing this in the biggest countries for renewables in Europe. So I haven't mentioned that we're mostly active in Germany, even though we're Swiss based, just because this is the market where they started. The company Wind Energy Trading, we're starting now with Italy. France will follow soon, but when we need as well a certain setup. So we are only active in markets where we have a single balancing price. And this is the case in UK, and it's the case in Italy now. In France, it's kind of like a trade system. But that means, like in Switzerland, for instance, there is not a single balancing price so far, which is a request from the European Union. But we all know how the discussions are going on this side. But still, like for us, for our know-how, we can only perform when we are on a single balancing market, because at the end, the balancing price is very important and a very important risk factor, and that's why companies are as well, let's say, trying, or an asset owner is trying to secure this risk, because if he gets an invoice at the end of the year or at the end of the month from the grid operator, there are quite some big surprises in there, and he's very happy that he can hedge this risk, basically, and outsource this risk to us and to other specialized companies doing this balancing risk hedging, or direct marketing, or however you want to call it. And one more point, just to be complete, wind energy trading is not active directly with assets. So we are a partner of sales companies, or of, let's say, mid-sized companies that are very strong, have a strong regional presence in terms of sales, and then they don't have the 24/7 setup to manage the renewables around the clock themselves. So they partner with us, and so they are the face of the customer. They have the contract with the customer, and we are the partner, white label partner. So the client does, like, it depends on the company if the asset knows about us or not, but you can do it without being known, at least in Germany. In other countries, it's a bit more tricky, but it's as well more and more known to specialize basically these roles, to say, okay, fine, we have, even in a fully integrated utility, you have a sales department and you have a trading department. It's not the same department. It's very rare even that it's the same boss in a utility that is heading the sales team and the trading team for this regard. So basically we're living this for mid-sized companies, and then the other clients we have is basically utilities that are just for a strategic reason, outsource some of the risk to us on a yearly basis, on a 2-year basis. But these are the two, and this is making us so big because we can basically easily get wind farms on. So right now last year we managed 1,500 farms, solar and wind farms in total, 6 gigawatt installed capacity. This year it's a bit less. So I think now I'm done with all aspects around the company.
No, but it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting approach. And you mentioned Germany, of course, and I'll come back to that later on, because Germany is a market in itself, especially when it comes to wind. So it'll be interesting. But when you mentioned the differences around this, and you also mentioned some of your partners, and can you give me an example of one of those partners? You don't have to mention the name of them if you want to be a white label partner, but what kind of partners are you working with? If the larger utilities are running this on their own, you are the fast, agile trading partner for wind, but you don't own the assets per se. So who's bringing you the business and that you're trading on?
One partner that I can definitely mention is BKW. So they have own assets, and they do as well sales on this side. And there we have often even collaboration, that we go together to the clients, or the clients is fully aware that we are the one, and then taking the imbalance risk. But I mean, there's for the ones knowing this market a bit better, just to be complete, like there is as well the other risk that is based on the subsidy index. So for us, it doesn't matter if we are talking about a PPA, so a subsidy-free wind or solar contract, or a subsidy scheme. We do always the same product. So this means the hourly spot minus a fee. So we only taking care of this imbalance risk. But for sure, when you talk about the PPA, you have all this, and you had this probably already discussed multiple times in your podcast, you have all this, let's say, volume risk and shape risk and these kind of things. This is not our business. We're really focused only on this very short-term part. But every wind and every solar farm, independently if they're in the subsidy system or not, they need to have someone taking care of that. And if they're not doing it themselves, so this is basically as well where our strength lies, to say, okay, fine, we are kind of in a product that is needed by everyone. We are not like saying like, okay, fine, and then as we are in the background, we don't have a real issue. Let's say we are not seen as someone who's picking a client, so we are always a partner towards people doing PPAs and towards people doing sales and renewables in their region. And I mean, BKW is active on the PPA side and on the subsidies part side. And these are probably the good reasons why they had the idea to buy as well wind energy trading at one time.
No, but I think, and you touch on plenty of interesting things. If we move a little bit further out and when we look about the overall of renewables with wind in focus, you've been in the industry for a fair bit of time. You know this industry, especially from a European point of view. Germany might be leading the way. You mentioned Italy and France for yourself, but how do you see this panning out? Subsidies came in early on that gave a major boost for wind in general. What's happening? What are the major trends now for wind in Europe? And do you see any drawbacks?
Well, we see it more on the market. That basically, I mean, we had this phase at the beginning when this market started, 2012. When this basically was, from a legal standpoint, obligatory to, at least in Germany, to put it on the market and to pass by the market and not anymore by the grid operator, that we had a lot of negative prices, very like long period of negative, really very negative prices. The problem was there was zero flexibility in the market to really answer this volatile production and this, even though it was way smaller at that time, still, let's say, big volume of when days like today in Zurich, when there is a lot of wind, like the system is full of wind and it needs to be handled, and like every year it's getting better. First the assets were getting more flexible, then it was starting with let's say on the consumer side being maybe more. And then, I mean, for sure now with what happened last year, like you can really I mean, more and more people are interested as well, are buying, have a spot contract on the buying side. So this is what is gonna has to happen next, and where basically it's a bit, from my point of view, surprisingly, at what point politics is not really like they're always pushing more renewables, but they have not really pushed a lot of solutions to digest all the renewables in the system. And when we look now from a purely, let's say, commercial point of view, I mean, we have to shut off, from a commercial point of view, wind and solar farms quite regularly, which is a pity because, I mean, it's for free, right? Like, I mean, but then when you look on the market, you have no choice. And then this is one direction that you can handle very easily. So when there's too much renewables, you just shut them off. It's not only done for grid reasons, it's as well done for commercial reasons. And then, I mean, in the other direction, it's a bit more tricky. When you have basically, when you need more power, and you cannot just increase the output of a solar or a wind farm. And this is where really the consumption flexibility has to come in, where car batteries have to come in. And I mean, as you can hear, everything I'm talking about is not yet established, but it will come, from my point of view now, really fast, and has to come. Otherwise, we will just hit a wall with the renewables built in. Like last year in Germany, it was 7 gigawatts of solar that were built. And we saw now already in February, the grids were full. They were shut off basically for grid congestion reasons. They had to shut off solar in February. So you can just imagine what this translates to when we hit the spring and the summer. In terms of issues. This is now I switch to the grid side. Sorry for jumping a bit around here, but I mean, it's definitely visible that we are lacking, and we need more flexibility for the market, because at the end, this is the most efficient way of organizing things. And I mean, there are more and more batteries coming in the market that are not only providing ancillary services, but as well really going into the intraday market. And when you have the solar basically ramping up and down, this is where batteries can really help a lot and have the right terms of flexibility to basically avoid these 15 minutes. You have always this block when you trade, but the solar shape is going right through this block. So you always have one that is where you have way too much energy and the other not. And the market is like, when you look at the price difference at these two blocks between the one that has too much and the one that has too little, it's just crazy. It's just insane. And this is driving, for instance, the price up for solar. For our business now, for solar plants are getting really expensive to be balanced and very, very costly. And as an asset owner, you should really think about what the costs are for this risk that you were not even considering 2 years ago as a cost. Now, it's a real cost, and it will just increase with more solar in the system. So long answer to your
no, but I like it. If so, we're saying we want more renewables. There's no doubt about it. We sometimes have a challenge of managing. If you would then speak to a solar developer or a wind developer for that matter, and you say, okay, you know what, you can produce it, but there are some risks here, and storage being one. If that's large grid battery storage or someone else, what would the recommendation be? You know, they snowed in. They started thinking about this 2, 3, 4 years ago, and now they're going to go and, you know, things have changed. You now have to think about this. What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, I said it basically already, but I think it's good to emphasize on that. Like, if I would build a solar park today, I would definitely build a battery with it. So let's say if
what kind of battery?
Install funnily enough, and I think politics in Germany never thought about that, but there is a thing called Innovationsausschreibung. So it's a subsidy specialized for new kind of system. And what became there the standard is a solar farm with a battery. And it has a ratio as well in terms of solar capacity versus installed capacity versus battery capacity. And actually we manage a couple of these combined system, and we just see the revenues that we can generate with the battery are very well aligned with the costs of the solar farm. So it's a perfect hedge. So basically, okay, you have to invest, I don't know, $1 million more in a battery to get this off, but then this risk it's kind of flat. If balancing price or if costs should drive back down on levels that we've seen before 2022, well, you have a battery that's making a bit less money, but your solar farm is as well less costly. And if we see a condition like last August where spot prices were around 600 euros in average, then, well, you have a very costly balancing for your solar farm. But next to it, you have a battery that is making as well, printing money. So in this is where it's really a perfect hedge in this regard. And just to be clear, the sales story is, the battery is balancing the solar farm. But in reality, you drive the battery as much as you can against the market, and you look only at the market with the battery, and you look only at the market with the solar farm, and you optimize them individually, but together they're still a strong team. Let's put it that way.
All right, and what do you see this happening then? So you mentioned a few examples.
It's basically all discussions that we have right now is they still thought about the subsidy scheme when they started to plan this kind of combination. But now, I mean, market is going back down now a bit, but in terms of, like, say, flexibility value. But now they're just saying, oh, well, I can do this as well without subsidies. I don't care anymore about the subsidy scheme, solar plus battery. I just do it in the market. So basically, solar developer, they, through the subsidy scheme, gained expertise in doing this combination. And now they're getting really better and better. I would not say they started on a perfect level, but now they're getting really better. And this means, like, the subsidy was doing a really great job here. Like, it was kicking off this topic, and now it might become a standard to do this kind of thing, because at the end, a battery just needs a grid access and a power line that has enough, let's say, capacity to. And it's everything that a solar farm has and normally already done. And then again, you can even play it a bit further and say, okay, if for a reason I have an amazing, in terms of development, I have a restriction on the grid level. I have a solar farm that is bigger than the grid that I can inject to. So I have to cut the solar farm off because my grid's not strong enough, or my grid connection is not strong enough. Well, the battery can actually help you here. and replace the grid for this instance. So it's getting like I think it's really a good development, and I see it really picking more and more up, and the people that started to do that are really, let's say, very excited about the future in this field. And I think it's as well start picking up in other countries now to do that.
Yeah, and I can imagine, and Germany also being one of the leading on this. And I remember I had a discussion with another guest, and some discussions around PPAs, and also how can we include also the storage parts, and not treat that differently in terms of a PPA, long-term PPA setup. And that was kind of, okay, we're thinking about it, but we haven't seen it yet. Whereas, in my world, a long-term PPA should, in terms of be as efficient as it can, include both of the areas. So you would have the solar or the wind plus the opportunity for storage, because. But I don't know how that situation is now. If that's part of the PPA,
I would say the battery is probably not helping a lot on basically giving you a base load out of your solar or wind farm. For solar, might be in a certain way depending on the battery size. But I think it's as well. Let's say from our common background, storage is a very important point. Water storage. So I think here we really have to distinguish between types of storage, and battery is the perfect storage for the short-term market, for really doing quick moves. So what we're doing basically, and we are always hitting the maximum what the battery owner is giving us as a possibility of turning the battery around, basically to go full charge to full decharge and back as often as we can. And then normally on the technical side they have some limitations, but this is where batteries are strong. When you want to store over a day power, then don't use a battery. Then you go more into water dams or something like that, where you pump storage, where you can really do something here. But at the end, it will be, we need all types of storages to make this happen.
No, for sure. And I think that's a common theme across our podcast as well. And in terms of transition, we need probably better tools in order, as you mentioned in the beginning, for trading, to making sure that we can automate as much as possible. There's still a kind of a human factor a part of this, because there needs to be, but for sure new digital tools will help to do this the faster it goes. Batteries is a common one as well, and I think that's really, really an interesting part. But I think from a wind point of view, I think that's an interesting way of transition. I know you also work a lot with solar, and you kind of have a seat on many energy chairs around the table and around the ecosystem. But
solar and wind are just very the same, and like they're really, I can there's no difference for us. In terms of forecasting quality, there are differences in terms of what, let's say, a forecast error in solar produces on the intraday market compared to wind forecast error. There are differences. But then, like, actually it's I would say it's standard. You optimize both of them together in the same portfolio. There are as well some synergies, because wind is more blowing the night than the day. So there is, let's say, that's a simplification, but let's say there are portfolio effects, and as well, let's say, keeping the team basically the whole year round, because there's definitely more sun in the summer than the winter, and more wind in the winter than the summer. So it's kind of like, it's a good fit, and balance it out in a good way. So at the moment we are like at 2/3 wind, 1/3 solar. And as I mentioned before, solar is getting more and more risky for us. So we're having a bit more of a closer look, but this is where the requests are. So basically the buildup in solar is way more faster and more massive now after the war started, and everyone tries to get off the gas, than on the wind side, where processes are just slower and new capacities coming in, not in the same speed as we see it right now happening in the solar side. And this all over Europe. And this is basically as well to pay attention to say, okay, fine, before one country that was a bit leading, like Germany, could export his problem on the solar hours just to the neighboring countries. But now the neighboring countries are building as well up in really big capacity. So it becomes a serious problem now inside each country, because the neighboring country is not anymore helping because they have the same problem. And this is something where I'm really looking for, or I'm scared and looking forward to this year, because this will be the first year where we see this effect really happening with this massive buildup that we had last year.
So expand a little bit on that. What do you mean in terms of you are excited to hear about it, but you're also a little bit afraid?
Well, it's like, I mean, we signed our contracts end of last year, so basically our clients are safe. We took the risk from them, and now we have to see if our forecasts and our way of predicting what's going to happen is right or wrong. This is basically the thing here. So it's kind of like, the opportunity really to see the system growing and becoming, let's say, more mature, and even it will change a lot. This is what is exciting about. But then, change might be as well risky to say, okay, fine. If we price our contracts wrong, that is making it more difficult for us to make money at the end of the year.
So we discussed on the pre-show, and we said this on the show many times. We as a co-host and the host of the podcast, we have the opportunity to ask the stupid questions. So, which is a good part. You're the expert, and I can ask the stupid questions. But one of the things that I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts around. We all know what happened in the last year, and with the Ukraine and Russia, and the impact that has had on the energy markets in general, which means that we have prices that we probably haven't seen. We have a volatility and with the gas, etc. From a company like of your size and focusing then on the wind, what have been the biggest challenges during this period of time for you guys?
Yeah, it was definitely the lack of flexibility, because the system was really like running really on the maximum level. I would say in August we were quite close to basically the system not working anymore, that we will not see any day-ahead spot prices anymore, because there was just not a match anymore between consumption and production for each hour or fixing. So I think the biggest challenge, I mean, you mentioned volatility. But like volatility itself, it's already painful. But if you combine it then with a lack of flexibility in the system, and this is not only the war, but it's as well the availability of nukes in France that played a major role here. And then when we look back on August, which was the most challenging month last year, then it was definitely as well like there was zero wind. It was super hot and dry. Like this was definitely like, I hope we never ever see a month like this again, even though for someone being for a while in the industry, it's anyhow still like in a weird dream to see that there's a factor 10 on everything you're doing. It's definitely like this was the most challenging month, and it's definitely you always say volatility is a friend of the traders, but I think for renewables, I mean, volatility is a friend of flexibility. So for renewables, we are basically have the opposite directions. Like we are like a big sheep troop that is always running the same direction. So when there's a forecast error, we don't like all the market has the same forecast error, and basically everyone is buying or everyone is selling at the same time. So we are definitely not keen on. We are not sitting on the good side, and in this moment, so our challenge is to be the fastest sheep or to be the more clever sheep, and to run a detour maybe that's a bit longer, but at the end we are faster at the end point that we want to reach. And this is basically the business we're in, and therefore I'm as well see renewables trading as a specialization. So it's not an intraday trader that can handle all kinds of things. It's about being specialized on one field. And really, renewables is a field that is, like even the ones in the team that are there for almost the whole existence of the company. So we have 2 people that are here for 9 years. They're still learning every day, and they're still surprised or get surprised by the market. So it's definitely something you learn every day, and you have to adapt every day. to a new situation. And it's a very special way of trading. It's not it's a very opposite of managing flexibility, which is amazing as well, and very passionate about that. I know this very well, but it's still very, very different.
I think that's in general. I have a lot of former colleagues and that are and also in financial trading, and you think that financial trading is you do everything, but the one that are really successful, you focus on a few things and you go very deep. And I think that's obviously, even with the support of digital tools and algo trading and digital trading, you need to be an expert on something else. But talking about experts, you are an expert on many things. And when I did some research apart from this one, I also saw that you are engaged with Solaris.
Yeah, Solarized, they're called.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
And also in terms of this, how you use softwares, if I understand it correctly, in terms of microgrids, and what I really, if you can expand a little bit about how this works, because I'm really curious to hear now when we're shifting a little bit from the wind to this one, and also listening to about the financial modeling, because we hear a lot about the production, we hear a lot about the trading, we hear about the tools that needs to be done to manage this ecosystem. But if we're moving from big production, big utilities now to smaller, be that solar or wind, which still are big energy assets, but we're coming in now to microgrids or even prosumers, our solar on the roofs or smaller things. There needs to be a bilateral business models around this. So what's your 5 cents around this?
Yeah, I mean, Solarize is more like it started like, it's a good friend of mine, former flatmate that founded that company. It's his second company, so he's doing this for fun. His first company is, let's say, one of the leading backbone system in the banking industry, or became it. So it's called Mambu. So he is not doing this for the money. He's doing this really for the world and the fun of it. So yeah, for me, he was looking for someone from the electricity business, basically, to support and to understand better, and asked all the stupid questions that he had, and that I knew once I explained to him, he will basically know 5 minutes later 1,000 times more than I know about that. And that's still the case. So there are already some fields. So what they're basically doing is they're into microgrids, and they're doing a lot about, let's say, already like having digital metering points everywhere, measuring, having as well the possibility. I talked yesterday to him to make now virtual PPA. So basically a solar farm from one rooftop, providing power to someone else somewhere completely different, to a fixed price. And I mean, he's coming in really with like, I don't know so much about banking system, but I think there are quite some people that think that's a revolution what they did with this company, and I think he's just there to do the same in this world. And like, I think the after 3 hours he asked me like, this energy data management, this sounds like it's like 50 years old and haven't had any innovation in the last 50 years. And it's true. Like, I mean, there is a lot to do, and he's now focused more really on this like, bringing some new vibe into everything that is metered business. And I mean, I'm as well realizing step by step how much of a game changer this brings to you once you're really capable to meter, like to dispatch basically a consumption on multiple tenants, on multiple, like to invent new tariffs to say, okay, during the solar hours you get the cheap solar power when you're a tenant of this building, but when you're not in the solar hours, well, that's where I said before, people are switching to spot price. So basically there you have opened then up the ideas to 1,000 other ideas. Either you buy it on the market, but you could as well combine it with water or whatsoever, but everything is real-time green. And it was always a kind of like a topic that I have for a long time in my mind. And I finally see someone really realizing it and doing the steps towards this kind of world in a serious way, and not in a, let's say, regulatory mindset, but really in a say, yeah, we're doing this because we know this is what we need for the energy transition, to integrate more renewables into that. And yeah, so far they're in a really good way, and it's really fun to watch, to see them grow and expand and have more and more partners, and as well being like, let's say, with a lot of companies that are for 100 years in this business, like the typical kind of Stadtwerke, that are just amazed by what they can do, what they never thought would even be possible, and partnering with them. So yeah, it's a pure pleasure for me to see that on a lot of angles and a lot of levels. But it's definitely like, yeah, what we said basically at the beginning, to say what is missing in the system. I think this is the kind of know-how and work that is really missing. Like how can we make transparent what you're really consuming, and not only make it transparent in a, let's say, paper kind of way, to say, yeah, I have a green certificate for that. It's really about, let's say, being real-time connected to assets, and consume what's coming out there, and maybe adjust your consumption as well to this production if you want to, or if you think it's cheaper, or it's better, or it's greener, in a way.
Yeah. No, I a little bit off the topic from you, but it was interesting to hear, and I think what really struck me around this, but I would love to bring you back, and maybe together with your friend around this, because I really like the business models around it. And I think that when we go through the podcast in general, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, we have a lot of new ways of looking from an engineering point of view, from a trading point of view. But if we're looking more and more towards this prosumer point of view, for me, it's extremely interesting to see the business models around it. So that's why it triggered a little bit. We also looked a little bit about now with EV charging, when we start looking at, all right, so how can I use my battery as part of this? How can I make money of my car? And Tesla has gone a little bit around this, but I'm pretty sure we will see more and more smaller business model into the microgrids, into us as prosumers moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, all new cars have they are ready to do directional charging, and now it's kind of like we're waiting for the regulatory part now
that's usually the case.
to follow. And yeah, I mean, there's like, maybe I'm not enough from technical side on the grid side involved, but I see like it seems to be so easy to get this off and to start it seriously. And I mean, yeah, there's some quite nice initiatives around to make like grid, supporting the grid with car batteries, but there's so much more you could do. And I mean, these batteries in the car is just standing around the whole day doing nothing. Like put them to work, like make them
for sure,
part of
sure. And I think
the solution.
we looked at connected car when I worked in the car industry, and we said the car, I think was it 93% of the time that was standing still, which is quite a bit. And as a normal car, an old-fashioned car, maybe which is an ICE car, and then this was not really, this was just a problem. But with an electric car, suddenly you have 93% of capacity of the day with a battery. So interesting to see. But you know what? All good things comes to an end. We're coming up to time. I would like to thank you a lot for coming on. It was a pure pleasure to catching up with you again after a few years, but also listening to all the great things that you're doing, and learn a little bit more about the trading around wind and the challenges and the opportunities that sits. Really interesting also to hear the startup mode that you're in, and to see how you're addressing that one. Maybe as a last question, coming back to your position as the CEO of the company, and driving this as one, we have quite a few younger, because I'm old, I can say younger people listening to our listeners on the show. What would you say, and what do you do when you're recruiting people now? People that come out of grad school, come out from business school, from an engineering school, and says, listen, energy is an industry that you should look into. What do you hear, and what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really like, I'm doing a lot of interviews because we are a very young company, and we have to recruit basically only from the university. We're not buying any experts, so we see ourselves as well part in this ecosystem to basically nourish them for more position after being maybe tired of working nights and weekends. And I mean, I have not to motivate anyone that comes to an interview to say, everyone is coming on and saying, I want to work in this field. Like I'm so like, and it really kicked off a lot since last year. So it's basically everyone saw it now, heard it now, is interested. I mean, it's for me, it's hard to imagine not to be passionate about it, but it's really like there's not one candidate lacking on the motivation to say, I want to go into this field, into renewables, understand how it's going, what is done there. And then, my answer is always, start with a position where you can really get your hands dirty, where you can move something, where it's not about listening, it's about understanding the system, like having then nice talks and nice views on what is going to be next. This is the second step. The first step is to understand the system and really, let's say, to get your hands dirty, and this is the base to really move on as well. If you start, let's say, in a position where it's more about the PowerPoint and less about seeing as well the impact of what you're doing with a mouse click or with a piece of code, then I think it's hard to really fully be in that. So basically that's what we offer, that what a lot of other young companies are offering here, and that's as well what makes it, let's say, still quite good for us in this market to recruit young people, because they're just coming in with this passion. We don't have to generate this; they're bringing it with us. Our job is more to give them then as well the possibility to touch on that. And for sure, when you have an environment where every good idea counts and every change is seen as an improvement, or every test of a change is seen as an improvement. Sometimes they fail as well, but we try at least. This is where we have as well this entrepreneurial and the startup kind of mindset in, and it's very stimulating as well to see it happen and to be part of it with people starting and seeing yourself back 15 years ago when you did.
No, I think that's really, really interesting, and it's a great closure of this podcast as well. And if someone had asked me 10, 15 years ago that people coming into the energy industry will be passionate about change, they will be entrepreneurial mindset, and they would think about the future of the world itself, I would be questioning that quite a bit. So it's a really interesting to see the development we see, not just in the transition of the whole energy industry, but also the approach from the next generation who will take over this one. But with that, Dominik, I would like to thank you a lot for coming on to the show. It was a pleasure to have you here, pleasure to catch up again. And I wish you all the best in the future with all your assignments around this, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to talk with you.
Excellent. And for our listeners, you have been listening to another episode of Insider's Guide to Energy. As you know, if you like the show, please comment, put your thoughts and minds to the episodes. Pretty sure Dominik will help us to answer any question that comes around as well. And if not, email me or Chris, and we will make sure that we forward the questions to Dominik. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great week.